positioning is kind of like an inflection point in an hourglass, I think. You have lots and lots of data points and information about your ICPs, about your competitors, about your market, fueling this sort of like understanding, this crystallization of like ultimately why we matter.
Messaging itself, I don't think it's not a one and done exercise. It's still an ongoing thing that you're going to have to iterate on. You're going to have to move with. Hi everyone, welcome back to Demand Decoded. Dan here as usual, with Phil as usual, I suppose. In today's episode, we're tackling something that comes up constantly with clients, with our own work, with customers that we work with, and that's messaging, and specifically how do we actually craft messaging as a business in the first place? And then how do we get it right across all of our marketing initiatives? And also we'll touch specifically on the homepage at the end, which is, one of the most important things to get right when it comes to messaging. And messaging seems to be like an ongoing conversation that we always have internally and with customers and with prospects. And it's one of those like evergreen marketing topics that every B2B company seems to struggle with. Like, we think about messaging as this thing that we just understand, and we just do it. And there's never, for me, like a strategic exercise that goes into messaging to provide this thought across all marketing initiatives.
Yeah, it's one of those marketing concepts that lives in kind of limbo between... Most people acknowledge and agree that it's a necessary thing, an important thing, and it's deserving of attention, but not as many actually go to the effort of focusing on it, creating something that's reusable and thinking about it strategically. So it kind of exists in the ether a little bit. Yeah. Everybody talks about it. Few codify it, like figure it out fully and document it in a way that's reusable. And that's what I think makes it such a challenge. And it's subject to so many interchangeable terms that even when businesses do start to look at it and do start to focus on it and think about it, quite often, quite quickly becomes a bit of a confusing mess because the terms are interchangeable. They get used to describe multiple things within that process. So yeah, it is challenging, and it does fall off the list sometimes.
Yeah, and without a proper messaging framework or documentation, you leave yourself open to opinions ultimately, and differences in what people are saying about your company to the wider world.
It's an extension, I think, of like the thinking and the rationale that essentially is behind personas and ICPs. Yeah. And it's all about being an outward-facing organization, and communicating things in ways that customers understand and resonate with. As opposed to taking an inward-facing view and communicating either the things that you care about internally that don't matter externally, or communicating about them in a way that don't make sense externally. So for me, messaging is communicating about the things that make sense to your organization internally, like why your product is good, why you developed it, what's unique about it, but in ways that make sense externally when buyers are entering the market for the category of product or service that you offer. And that transition, back in the days when personas were a newish concept to B2B marketers, well, I say newish, when they really became a popular concept, I said that the main benefit of having a persona thinking in an organization is doing that 180 turn from an internal facing team to an external facing team. You're no longer talking about, recent hires, funding rounds, and things that make sense internally, and talking about problems and solutions that you offer and customer challenges. And I think that's sort of has a little bit of consistency with this.
Absolutely, because I think what a lot of marketers will find is that if you talk to the product team, for example, who absolutely need to help you craft your message to the market, it will be very internally facing. It will be very feature driven. It will be very, specific to individual use cases and features ultimately. Whereas the outward facing message likely needs to be very results driven, like benefit driven, that end state driven, which isn't always, like, features are important, don't get me wrong, there's a place for those, but it's likely not going to be your leading message to the market.
Yeah, and you also see sometimes that the benefit that customers buy your product for initially isn't the benefit that they get long term, but it needs to be the one that's communicated in order to trigger the purchase. And likewise, the features that you think are the most impactful may not be the features that get you bought by your customer. So there's a difference of perspective, or another viewpoint that comes into play to communicate effectively.
Yeah, for sure. Before we get into the podcast today, here's a quick word from our sponsors, HubSpot. Think about listening to this podcast right now. You're probably multitasking and catching 70, maybe 80% of it. Now flip that and imagine only catching 20%. That'd be pretty crazy, right? Yet most businesses only use 20% of their data. All the important details in call logs, emails, and chats just left floating in digital space. HubSpot gives you access to those insights to help your business grow, because when you know more, you grow more. Visit HubSpot.com to get the full picture today. All right, well, let's get into this, because we're going to unpack, what messaging is, why it's so useful for you to have this, how to actually use it. And yeah, this might seem a topic that's been covered a lot, but hopefully we'll bring some practical lenses to actually how you can use messaging and what to do with it. So let's start off by actually defining these things, because messaging is so often confused with positioning and strap lines, and words are important here, and meanings and definitions are really important.
Yeah, agreed. So as you say, quite quickly when people start talking about messaging, they will often start talking in terms of positioning, or talking in terms of value proposition, or even going immediately to specific pieces of copy.
Yeah.
But actually, it's a step on that journey, and it exists between them and in distinction from them. So the order of play, I think, is something like define your ICP. We'll talk about that in more detail in a moment. Understand who you're trying to sell to. Determine your positioning in the ICP's market and mind. And positioning, of course, reflects ICP, their needs, their knowledge of the subject, their understanding, competitive forces, the landscape generally. ICP, positioning. From positioning, you can develop your value proposition, which is ultimately the succinct way of communicating the value of your product or service or solution in the market where the ICP exists. But still not necessarily an externally facing form. It can still be value proposition, an internal piece of work where you still allow yourself to speak in internal terms and use words that won't work externally. Once you've got your value proposition in place, you can start to build out your messaging, which is how do you communicate that value proposition across touch points, across channels, across locations, in the ways that customers will resonate with, will hook their attention, will build trust, build preference when they see those things, and start to bring yourself closer to being able to produce the assets that you need in ways that perform that role.
Yeah, I think the difference there, and I want to talk about taglines as well in a moment, but the difference between positioning and messaging is a really important one to get right. I recently kind of went through an exercise following April Dunford's positioning framework, which she's excellent, obviously. And you're almost looking at what she calls value pillars, which are pillars of your business and what you offer around what you serve to the market and the outcomes of those. But they are so internally facing. The messaging is all about how you then craft those externally to the market. And then how you bring in your proof and authority, which backs up your positioning, your differentiation, I think you mentioned your competitive landscape and why you're different to them and why they fall short instead of you. All of these things you can kind of tell already talking through them. Stitch all of those together. That's your messaging there. It can be pulled apart and then it can be put back together in different messages.
Yeah, there's kind of positioning is kind of like an inflection point in an hourglass, I think. You have lots and lots of data points and information about your ICPs, about your competitors, about your market, fueling this sort of like understanding, this crystallization of like ultimately why we matter. Like, why do we matter in our customers' future state, amongst other things. And then from there, you start to expand out again, because messaging exists at the brand level. We'll probably come on to this as well. Messaging exists at the brand level.
Yeah.
But within that, you're going to have some key pillars of your brand that are the core reasons you think, you know, ICP should take you seriously. And you may have one, but typical businesses have 2 or 3 of those. Yeah. And then each of those pillars is, you know, reinforced by specific features within their product or specific services that are offered. And you have messaging about those as well. And actually, it can go on for quite some time, you know, spreading out to finer and finer detail and bringing in things like, as you've mentioned, the right customer proof, the right testimonials, data points, results, the right wording and the right way to communicate based on triggers that bring purchase about, and lots of other issues. So it's that really nice inflection point in that process where you get down to a very crystallized statement of, you know, what it is we do and why that matters, and then from there you go out again.
Yeah. Straplines.
Really interesting topic.
What is the role of the strapline in all of this?
Yeah. Now, it's a branding element. Ultimately, a strapline is a part of the brand that captures and communicates to some degree your essence, right? The unique reason your business exists and why you are excited to take part in your market, I think, right? So it's a branding component, but brand straplines typically don't communicate about problems or products or pains or customer results or success. So they aren't a replacement for things like value proposition, things like messaging assets throughout the the various touch points. They belong right up there at the brand level, where you say more about your business than you can say in a single logo or a name, but not in the places where you need to convey meaning without further explanation.
Yeah, it's like, and this can also be part of the value proposition, the positioning exercise, which is like your vision for the business. That's kind of where I see the tagline come in. It's like this very visionary line or a few words that I think you put it quite well there, which is like why you exist in that category, like your purpose for being in business. And it could be something like inspiring ingenuity, or like empowering human technology, or like, you know, these lofty statements that on their own mean nothing, but like when you connect them with your brand, and you might use them internally, you might use them on your building signage, like in these areas where buyers don't need to understand what you do because it's already understood.
Yeah. They're really nice and powerful and good to have elements of your brand.
Yeah.
But let's be honest. Only the straplines that we remember are those of only the biggest organizations that have been advertising to us for years, right? We do not remember the straplines of the smaller purchases we make, the platforms we use in B2B. You know, that just doesn't happen. So don't allow yourself to be confused with the idea that your strapline will become remembered, recalled, and therefore belongs everywhere. That will work against you rather than for you. It's a supporting brand element, not something that we're trying to get like into the mind of our buyer so much so that they recall it, because that just doesn't happen without massive amounts of spend and time in the market in those cases.
Yeah. So once you've got your core positioning and messaging in place, and we can maybe talk about actually how to dissect that messaging in a little bit, but one of the next things to tie in is category entry points. And this is something that I was chatting to some people about at LinkedIn's headquarters, and they were kind of presenting this framework for a ad strategy, but actually it goes way beyond that, and it did get me thinking about how to tie it in with messaging. And this is really interesting, right? Because there will be maybe like 5 to 10 reasons, maybe more, that your buyers come in market for your product. And when we think about how we want to educate the market on a particular message, like 95% of our market won't be in market to buy at a particular point in time. We want to make sure that they associate our brand and our message with that category entry point when it happens.
Yeah.
So tying those two things together, our message, how we are differentiated, how we stack up against competitors, our results, with then category entry points. So the trigger that makes them go, oh, we need a product for that. We need a service for that. That's a really important connection.
Yeah. And each category entry point represents like one part of the messaging framework you want to build, so that you know how you speak about those category entry points, across channels and across touch points. It's also, I think, an adjunct to the previous section on ICP, which is most businesses acknowledge that they need to understand their ICP, and it's often said that you can look at your existing customer base to identify, or as part of the process of identifying your ICP, and I agree, and that's true. But an important point to make is that you must look at your customers through the lens of the state they were in when they came to you.
Yeah.
Because your current customers will be different to the customers that they were when they first bought your product or started to onboard or started working with you. And your ICP isn't defined in their current state, it's defined in how they were working, performing, and progressing when they bought you. And I think that is right next to that category entry point issue, which say, we help businesses with these problems, and working with us, they resolve those problems. Understanding those problems, the reasons they move in market for the solution, is a part of what makes them your ICP.
Yeah.
If they've already solved that problem, they're not going to be your ICP. I was thinking about this particularly in terms of like cloud and IT companies, right? I mean, it's still a big industry, not quite the sort of excitement around it when, virtual computing first became a big thing, but nevertheless, still a lot of business there. But ultimately, a lot is still focused around transforming businesses with cloud, with SaaS software, with virtualization of their processes. But if they've already gone through that process, you're not in a position to provide that transformation benefit. No. So if what you do is transform, you're looking for companies that have not yet transformed.
Yeah.
And then you can start to say, well, what triggers their desire to transform? So yeah, really important part of the ICP and part of the messaging as well.
Yeah, and when you tie those two things together, like the lasting impact of that message should resonate even further, right? Because like it's so closely tied to the trigger when they come into market. It's like, oh, well, who can help me with that thing? Because there was also the stat, I brought this up a few episodes ago, and I can't remember it now. I could get my phone out, but it was around the brands that are on the initial kind of vendor selection list, how many of those actually turn out being the chosen one, and it's up there with like 80% or something like that, and this helps you achieve that.
Absolutely.
Ultimately.
Yeah, because you're creating like mental availability recall is easier if you're suddenly synonymous with something in your customer's mind. And if you're synonymous with a pain that they suddenly feel acutely, or a problem that they can't bear any longer, and you've been messaging around that over a period of time, you're in a very favourable position indeed. Yeah.
One thing we should mention is actually how to get this information, though, because I appreciate that not all marketers will have, instant access to the category entry points for their customers. If you're working in quite a complex industry where maybe you don't understand the product as well as your product team or your sales team, then how do you actually think about these category entry points? And there's a few simple ways you go about that. Analog conversations with your sales team, with your product team, but you can also layer in tools like Gong, tools like Ask Elephant that allow you to analyze sales conversations, to extract the pain points, to extract the messaging, well, not the messaging, the conversations they're having, the pains that they're expressing in these conversations, and get it to collate that information for you.
Yeah. It's like performing customer interviews without actually having to go and do it. And of course, customer interviews are another way to get some of this information, as is customer and ICP research.
Yep.
There's a variety of ways to do it, but you're right. The tools that exist that can sort of scrutinize your calls as they're happening and give you added value information out of them. A very powerful way to go.
Yeah.
So a variety of methods do exist to get that information, and it doesn't have to be high cost, which of course is very helpful and very useful to SMEs for whom proper market research is sometimes a bit out of reach.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Like now that we have AI and the ability to almost create our persona in a virtual form, like in a Claude project or a custom GPT or something, and we layer in all of this research like transcripts from sales calls or product calls, and then ask it questions about messaging. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? Like it's a very cost-effective way to like have a makeshift ICP answer, thoughts and questions.
Most definitely, yeah. I see a lot of potential for that approach. And yeah, the idea of having a sort of virtual customer at your fingertips that you can query anytime you need is an incredible boost for a business, and could like dramatically improve the performance of some of their activities because of their ability to get really close to customer priorities, challenges through their messaging.
Yeah, for sure.
Here's a quick story from us at Blend and our customer, Daytel. Daytel were launching a completely new product in a brand new market with a different type of buyer. To do this effectively, they knew they needed to rebrand, overhaul their website, and rethink their go-to-market strategy. We partnered with them to achieve this, transforming their brand, rebuilding the site with their new identity, and working with them long-term to shift from lead generation to demand generation. The impact? 35% more revenue, 63% more profit, and 800% ROI from marketing. And to top it off, a HubSpot Impact Award to recognize the success that we had together. This is what happens when you have a partner who has strategic, creative, and technical expertise all working together. If you're in a similar place and want to discuss how we can help your business grow, just head over to blendb2b.com. If you're enjoying this show, let me recommend another one from the HubSpot Podcast Network that I personally never miss. Nudge, hosted by Phil Agnew. What I love about Nudge is that it's all about the psychology and science behind human behavior. What makes us take action, form habits, or say yes. And then it shows how those same principles shape great marketing and sales. In one episode, Phil looks at how just 3 words in a text message boosted vaccination rates and may have saved hundreds of lives. That's the endowment effect at work, a tiny psychological nudge creating a huge outcome. Every episode of Nudge is about 20 minutes, fast-paced, no fluff, and packed with ideas you can actually use. Check it out. Nudge is available wherever you get your podcast.
All right, let's talk about how we make this consistent across everything. Because whilst, we've spoken about how to think about messaging, how to craft these things together, how do you actually make sure it's consistent then across all touch points? Because this doesn't stop at the homepage. It doesn't stop at your website. Correct. It goes through every single go-to-market activity that you're doing.
Yeah.
At least it should.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of marketers would agree that this can become second nature to them once they understand messaging and they understand their customer. You aren't constantly referring back to something to write every single word that you produce. It becomes part of your operational DNA once you have it established. But it can be really useful to go through a process of identifying, orienting, and identifying the right approach to take to communication, so that you, in situations where you do need to refer and reflect, you have something, and as you go forward, you know what you're doing. So it pays to continue that journey from having defined your ICP, your positioning, your value prop, to create a messaging framework. We call ours Messaging House. There's multiple models that you can find for this, but create a messaging framework that covers your use cases ultimately and provides you with the ways to describe and to communicate and evidence and reinforce your brand's value proposition, your brand pillars, your product features and benefits, and your category entry points, I would say, are probably the most important things to think about. And, at each level there, you want to, again, be thinking about how do we make what we understand to be true internally be appealing and relevant and to resonate with our buyer when they see it, whether that's in written content, ads on social, our website, within AI even, having that piece of work there that defines and governs it. And yeah, pretty soon marketers won't need to refer to that daily, but it becomes their rubric, their crib sheet for how to do things as they go forward, as they bring on new team members, or as they introduce AI to their processes. It's the way to brief and govern that creative process.
Yeah, the messaging house framework is a really good one to talk about for a little bit, and maybe we can layer on screen for YouTube watchers an example of this, because it kind of takes some of the things we've been talking about already and just puts it into a visual framework that can be presented to the business, can be presented to your marketing team, your sales team, whoever it may be. And it starts with that umbrella statement at the top, which is your core message to the market that will resonate with the largest number of people. Then you've got the pillars below it. And we kind of spoke about pillars before, and these are like your next core messages down. And that can be, I wouldn't probably go above 5. You shouldn't go overboard with this. It's core messages that are going to resonate with your market across the board, but for specific category entry points, for example. And then at the bottom, you've got the foundations of the house, which is the evidence, the proof points, the support that backs up everything above it. Perfect. And keeps it, sound, ultimately.
That is the way to do it, for sure. Yeah, and like you say, if you go overboard with this, you just end up in the same situation you had when people went overboard with personas, which is too much information to be able to use effectively, and a dilutive effect rather than additive effect. So yeah, it's nice to, by understanding, like you said, your ICP's reasons for buying, you can prioritize, you can go after the ones that you meet the best. No solution answers every single question. And therefore prioritize and keep it constrained, which will make it much more actionable.
Yeah. One more thing on consistent messaging, because I think there's 2 different ways that this benefits marketers. One, I just think your messages to the market and their category entry points, their pain points and your pillars, should just be ingrained in you. You shouldn't have to refer actually to messaging documentation if you're a marketer doing this day in, day out. You just shouldn't. That should be learnt behavior over time. That totally is just ingrained in you. Whenever you are, doing a new ad or doing a landing page or putting some sort of content into the market, you should be thinking about what is the message, what's the reason behind doing this. That's just second nature. But as we start to use AI more and more to create content for us, to execute ideas for us, having documentation to be able to upload into knowledge in Claude projects, in custom GPTs, allows it to draw from that and create carefully crafted things from your messaging.
Absolutely. This plus ICP plus product documentation can create such powerful projects within Claude, for example, that can create content that is, create content and ideas, like you said, that you can then act upon as a marketer, which are, so far along the process and so close to what you need. It's an incredible force multiplier for that resource, that team. So this becomes one of those very useful assets to have at your disposal, like you say, even though it's not something you refer to daily. And you shouldn't underestimate the value of the point you made, which is when communicating to your business about what you're doing and why and how we talk about ourselves. That's really important too, because ideally a whole business is united around the messaging framework that they use and talks the same way. Sales should use the same language to describe features and how problems are solved. So it has its purposes in the organization, even though it might not be the thing you use every day as a marketer.
Yeah. Cool. But yeah, that's how I would think about, creating it and making it consistent. Should we dive into homepage?
Let's,
specifically now, because, do you want to kick things off with thoughts around homepage messaging? I know you've got some good ideas and thoughts there.
It's simply the most visible, the single most visible, and the single highest impact application of messaging there is. In fact, when you look at the content of a website, few, if any, other things are as connected to the outcome and the result as the clarity of your messaging in the eyes of your ICP, ultimately. But for all the reasons we've discussed and described, Businesses struggle to get homepage messaging, both at the highest level and throughout, right. And by right, I mean relevant and appealing and explanatory to an ICP who's there because of a trigger, who's done some research, and you need to convert them ultimately. So, I've talked, about the common pitfalls in a number of places, but like to use your strapline as a core element of your messaging on your homepage is incredibly risky, because those straplines don't contain value proposition information that tells buyers why you're the right solution for the entry point that they are currently researching. They don't help you communicate the benefits or the proof that you have to support that story. They're part of your brand story, not your customer's story, effectively. So shifting position on the homepage messaging from one of communicating what matters to us, what's important to us, or what sounds nice, to one of using our messaging framework to strike the right notes and the right chords with our customer so that they feel motivated to stay and explore further, incentivized to convert because they're in the right place and they understand they are, is the art of homepage messaging, and is what needs to happen in order to maximize the results of both your website as a conversion tool and truly all other marketing activity when it drives visitors to your website.
So what is it that the homepage message actually needs to accomplish for your business and your website?
I mean, put simply, it's to clearly and concisely communicate what you do, for who, and why it's different or better than alternative solutions. And you don't have to necessarily fit all aspects of that into the headline. It's the page at large, but you do need to get that across quickly. The problem we face still currently, user behavior always moving, always changing, but no matter what we've done prior to a website visit happening, on average, visitors will still spend just seconds looking at what they first see to make a decision about whether to pursue this route of inquiry or to abandon it for something else. Meaning what your homepage headline says has to get some of that across quickly if you're going to keep people who are ready to buy on your site. Then, if you've done that well, you can use your other homepage elements, the subline, the bullets, the calls to action, the images, to add to that and to get across, the three layers of what do you do, who do you do it for, and why should they use it. And then, of course, you can start to layer in content lower down the page which supports that. So key benefits, proof points, before and after type comparisons, whatever approach you want to take to backing that up. But it's so important that we really get out of our own way to some extent and don't intentionally or unintentionally obfuscate what's important, and we communicate it really clearly. And the work that People ER has done at Winter and at CXL has just found it over and over and over again. Buyers are always clear about the fact that they want to understand what you do, not be entertained per se, or not understand on your website.
I would also mention Clemence Lepers as somebody to follow on LinkedIn for homepage messaging advice. She's brilliant.
Excellent.
It takes me back to Inbound a couple of years ago, where we were kind of doing these website like UX assessments on the fly for people, and one of the core things to look at was the homepage messaging. And I don't know how many conversations I had, a lot of conversations, and I'd open up their website, and the first thing I'd say is like, I don't know what you do. Because even if it was like quite a crafted message, so often there would be like clever words in there, like the
cryptic
words like orchestration and like AI powered, and words that mean nothing to the actual outcome of your solution. And that they're just not things to include in homepage messaging, because you have, what's the blink test, 8 seconds or something to communicate exactly what you do to that person, and like you need to use the most clear, concise language possible in order to get that across.
Yeah. Fletch are another group to watch, and they have a library of before and after work on their website, which is just a great way to get inspiration about how to shift from that internal perspective to that external perspective in sometimes like unexpected ways. What I'm not trying to do is beat the creativity out of website design and content. We still need to and can be creative, but we need to be creative about how we communicate important things.
Yeah.
And actually the Fletch library of before and after is a really great way to sort of just like open up your mind to how you could approach that. And you are right that, you know, so many websites, when you bring them first up, you simply don't know what they do. And I think businesses sometimes overweight the degree of work that's happened before. They expect that their visitor will understand them better than they do, or behave as though they understand them better than they do, when in reality the majority of buyers will behave as if they don't know what you do. And you can really undo a lot of good work if you don't get it clear on your homepage in particular. Another classic pitfall to make is to engineer your homepage and critical parts of it for returning visitors as opposed to new visitors. But the reality is that actually it needs to be optimized for new visitors if you're going to grow pipeline. Most B2B websites are not destinations for returning visitors on the whole, and optimizing for that audience, or not consciously optimizing for that audience, but building an experience which is only really understood by returning visitors is a big mistake to avoid. And, you know, let's not forget that critical call to action as well. That's a part of your homepage message, and another part where people can feel really reluctant to get clear, get concise, and get like specific about it. So we end up with really vague, get started, you know, find out more, contact us. And actually there are different ways to signpost and message the entry to your pipeline that can perform better than all of those. And it's worth thinking about your ICP, thinking about their trigger point, and thinking about why they're on your website. It's usually not for entertainment, it's to consider purchase. So align to that.
When we think about messaging, like typically we think of the words that we're using, right? But there's actually more components to that, like the image in your homepage hero section. Very important to the message.
Absolutely.
Part of it.
Yeah, throughout the page, throughout the site, imaging should support what you're saying, and vice versa. Again, it's like, it's okay to have some photography. It's okay to have some abstractness to your website. But wherever and whenever possible, you want to show things that either confirm what's being read, i.e. show your product, show your service in action, or help with the future pacing, you know, help the person to see, imagine, and feel what it will be like when they're in that future state. Going completely off that and using, you know, extreme sports photography, you know, the sort of lifestyle shots that you see, kids in capes, that sort of thing, you know, just isn't going to help reinforce the message that you're trying to get across.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you've done some great work recently with customers on homepage messaging, so I'm sure you'd be happy to chat through that in more detail. One thing I would say, like, anything else to say on website messaging before?
No, just it's important. Get it right. You'll see the benefits quite quickly if you do.
Messaging itself, I don't think it's not a one and done exercise. It's still an ongoing thing that you're going to have to iterate on. You're going to have to move with, like, as markets shift, and like cloud you mentioned earlier, like people shifting from on-premise data storage to cloud data storage and infrastructures, like now they're shifting to AI.
Absolutely.
You know, infrastructures. Like, so the messaging around that would obviously have to evolve and change over time. So like your message from a product perspective, as you grow, as you add new features, you need to then dissect those into messages for the market.
Yeah, absolutely. Your messaging needs to move with the market, critical, you know, because you'll just fall behind and stagnate if you don't. But you also should test different parts of your messaging at different times. So for example, when it comes to, you know, that critical homepage message, you can use different entry points and build your message around that for a period of time, you know, because either it's being spoken about at large and people are really like focused on it at the moment, or you think it will improve conversion rates, or you think it will accelerate sales cycles, and then try another part of your message framework to communicate. You don't have to stick to just one version of any one of these things at any one time, in addition to moving with the market, your customer, trends, and keeping pace with those changes.
Here's a question for you.
Yeah.
How do you measure the impact of changing that homepage message?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, because obviously more and more of what marketing does is either immeasurable, because it happens in the dark on platforms where we don't have access to the data, or it's measured in a way and in a time that's far removed from the moment of impact. I think messaging would probably be seen in conversion rate lift predominantly, but also in the narrative, right? In the conversations you have with people. So if you've got some sort of AI tool, Gong or Ask Elephant, looking at calls, and they're citing the entry point that you use on your homepage, you can start to build this sort of anecdotal, qualitative feedback loop, which is really valuable. And then you really want to be looking at pipeline, creation and close performance, for the most part.
Yeah, I just wrote down signals there, because I think it's going to be hard to measure the ROI impact of a messaging change overnight, because if your sales cycle length is 12 months, like, that's just literally not going to happen.
Yeah.
What you need to look for is the signals that are showing you that that message is resonating with the market.
I would say that if you're in a position currently where your messaging is that fuzzy kind that says nothing, or is like hyper internal in how it thinks about what you offer, and you make a shift to a ICP focused, problem solved, benefit achieved focus, then you stand the chance of seeing a measurable impact quickly. In the form of website conversion, high intent conversion. And then thereafter, you can test different iterations, and you may not see like measurable increases, but you can use all the data, all the insights you have at your behest and available to inform those decisions and hypothesize, I think the market will resonate better with this entry point message than that entry point message. And then used collection of signals to see if there's any resonance. Sometimes in marketing, you don't get anything back, and you have to follow your informed instinct, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah. I think to kind of wrap things up, messaging is just so important. Like, it can be so easy from a marketing perspective to get sucked into channels and tactics and things, the hype that everyone's talking about, really, really quickly, and follow those shiny objects. But messaging is just so worth the investment and the time and energy to understand it. Like, understand what your customers are saying, understand what the market thinks about your category and what they care about, and then transition that into your strategy, how you communicate it in channels, through tactics, etc., and you'll see the benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, just to go back to an early point you made, the opportunities that AI presents in this area, in this field, are incredible. And it's pretty easy to get to a point where you can ask AI what it thinks of your messaging through the eyes of your ICP and your customer. And that doesn't actually require heaps of data and knowledge to achieve, because truth be told, effective messaging is best practice ultimately at the end of the day. Not to say that messaging is all identical across businesses or products, but whether it will be understandable by your ICP, whether it will make sense to them, whether it will appear to their entry point, you can get to the point where an AI persona can tell you that very quickly, very easily. And then you've got a very quick route to go to test different ideas and pursue the winning ones. And that can help you get out of the traps that people find where overly creative, overly obfuscated, overly internal, using their strapline, lacking the key things that effective messaging needs. So thinking about how you use AI in this is really important for the future of growth, I think.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, I think there's so many podcasts right now that are talking about AI use cases. Maybe we overlook them sometimes, but like, for example, I have our persona information uploaded into a Claude project which synthesizes prompts in like ChatGPT, etc., which we can then use to craft content around that and track. To see if we're being mentioned and cited, and the use cases you get from having this documentation are absolutely incredible.
I think that one of the broad effects of AI is ushering in good buyer-centric marketing practices, doing things that are good for buyers and always have been, but we've had plenty of reasons to deviate from over the past years. And messaging that, given how you're going to get so many fewer visits to your website overall, but the people that do visit are going to be likely to be in a higher educated, higher qualified position to convert. A homepage messaging, a website messaging that speaks to them directly, clearly, quickly, is just good business. And so we're seeing AI encourage us back to, I would say, in some cases, buyer-centric behaviours that are really healthy, really good for business.
Yeah. All right, should we wrap it up there?
Yep, that's good.
Cool. Don't sleep on messaging. Very important. Take it into everything you do.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, awesome. We'll wrap it up there. Thank you for listening to this episode, and we will catch you next time. Bye, everyone.
Cheerio.
This episode of Demand Decoded was brought to you by Blend. We help B2B technology companies grow through strategic, creative, and technical expertise, bringing you the capabilities you need to drive demand and turn it into real revenue impact for your business. If you enjoyed this episode, follow Demand Decoded on your favorite podcast platform, leave us a quick review, and we'll see you next time with more insight to help you grow.